Welcome to Cheat House. Join us for relatable cheating stories that will make you laugh, cry, and nod your head in recognition. I never thought my life would spiral into such chaos. My name is Emily, and for years, I prided myself on the strength of my relationships. My husband, Jake, and I had been married for 6 years, and my best friend, Sarah, had been in my life for nearly a decade. Together, we were a trio of laughter, support, and shared memories, or so I thought. Looking back, the signs were there, though subtle enough to miss. Jake would often mention Sarah in casual conversations, her sense of humor, her kindness, even her new haircut. At first, I felt a flicker of pride. I thought, it's wonderful that my husband gets along so well with my best friend. But as the weeks turned into months, the compliments became more frequent. Their interactions lingered longer, and I began to feel like an outsider in my own home. It all started one summer evening. Sarah came over for dinner, as she often did, with her infectious energy lighting up the room. Jake had prepared his signature pasta dish, and the three of us sat around the table, sipping wine and sharing stories. I remember laughing so hard my stomach hurt, thinking, these are the moments I'll cherish forever. Little did I know that night would mark the beginning of my heartbreak. A few weeks later, Jake began coming home later than usual. His excuses were mundane: work meetings, gym sessions, errands. I trusted him completely, so I brushed off my growing unease. After all, every relationship has its ebbs and flows, right? But one evening, while scrolling through social media, I noticed something odd. Sarah had posted a story, a photo of a restaurant I knew Jake loved. It wasn't the post itself that caught my attention, but the timing. Jake had told me he was working late that night, yet there was a timestamp that didn't add up. I tried to ignore the gnawing doubt, but the pieces of the puzzle began falling into place. The whispered phone calls, the way Jake seemed to avoid looking me in the eye when I mentioned Sarah, and Sarah's sudden hesitance to meet one-on-one. My heart told me something was wrong, but my mind resisted. Not them, I thought. They wouldn't. The truth unraveled one rainy afternoon. Sarah showed up at my door, tears streaming down her face. She didn't have to say a word. I could see the guilt written all over her. When she finally spoke, her words felt like knives. "Emily, I'm pregnant," she said, her voice trembling. "And it's Jake's." I stood frozen, my world crumbling around me. At first, I thought it was some cruel joke, but the look in her eyes told me otherwise. Anger, betrayal, and heartbreak surged through me all at once. How could the two people I trusted most in the world do this to me? Confronting Jake was equally devastating. At first, he denied it, calling Sarah a liar. But when I showed him the messages I had found on his phone, messages that left no room for doubt, he broke down, admitting everything. "It was a mistake," he pleaded, his voice desperate. "I didn't mean for it to happen, but it wasn't just one mistake. It was months of deceit, stolen moments, and lies. And now, a child was on the way, a permanent reminder of their betrayal. The aftermath was a blur of tears, sleepless nights, and endless questions. Why wasn't I enough? How could they do this to me? I cut ties with Sarah, of course, and filed for divorce from Jake. But the pain didn't magically disappear. It lingered, a heavy weight on my chest. Months later, I began to rebuild my life. Therapy helped me navigate the emotional wreckage, and I found strength in my family and new friendships. I realized that their betrayal said more about them than it did about me. As for Jake and Sarah, I heard through mutual acquaintances that they tried to make their relationship work, but eventually fell apart. It didn't bring me joy to know that, only closure. In the end, I learned that trust is fragile, and the people you love can break it in unimaginable ways. But I also learned that healing is possible. I now stand stronger, wiser, and more determined to never let anyone dim my light again. After the divorce papers were signed, I moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. It wasn't much, but it was mine, a space free of memories tainted by Jake and Sarah. The first night was the hardest. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the crushing weight of loneliness and betrayal. My mind replayed every moment, every red flag I'd ignored, every whispered conversation I'd chalked up to paranoia. But the next morning, something shifted. I realized I had two choices: let their betrayal define me or reclaim my life. I chose the latter: therapy and self-reflection. Therapy became my sanctuary. My therapist, Dr. Lin, helped me untangle the web of emotions I was caught in. Anger, sadness, confusion, and even guilt. She guided me through it all. "It's not your fault, Emily," she reminded me during one particularly hard session. "Their actions are a reflection of their choices, not your worth." Those words became my mantra. Slowly, I started to believe them. I also began journaling, pouring my thoughts onto paper each night. Writing became cathartic, a way to release the pain and track my progress. I wrote letters to Jake and Sarah, letters I never sent, detailing every ounce of hurt and betrayal they'd caused. And then, one evening, I burned them, watching the ashes drift away like the remnants of my old life, reconnecting with myself. For years, I'd lost myself in my roles as a wife and a best friend. Now, I had the chance to rediscover who I was without them. I took up painting, something I'd loved in college but abandoned when life got busy. The vibrant colors on the canvas became a reflection of my emotions, sometimes chaotic, sometimes serene, but always honest. I also joined a hiking group, finding solace in nature. Each step on the trail felt like a step away from the pain, a step toward healing. The fresh air, the sound of leaves crunching underfoot, the camaraderie of strangers who shared my love for the outdoors. It all reminded me that life was still beautiful, even after heartbreak. An unexpected encounter. One day, while browsing a local bookstore, I ran into someone unexpected. Luke, an old college friend I hadn't seen in years. He was kind, funny, and most importantly, a breath of fresh air. We started catching up over coffee, and what began as casual conversations turned into something deeper. Luke knew about my past, my guarded heart, and the walls I'd built around it. But instead of shying away, he embraced it. "You've been through hell, Emily," he said one evening. "But look at you. You're still standing. That's strength." I wasn't sure if I was ready for a new relationship, but Luke never pressured me. He became a friend first, someone who reminded me that not all connections were destined to break my heart. The final chapter with Sarah and Jake. Months later, I received an email from Sarah. Seeing her name in my inbox sent a wave of anxiety through me, but curiosity got the better of me. Her message was an apology, long, detailed, and laced with regret. She admitted that her actions were selfish and that she lost not just my trust, but also her own sense of self-respect. She wrote about how her relationship with Jake had been rocky and how they'd parted ways shortly after the baby was born. "I don't expect your forgiveness," she wrote, "but I needed you to know how sorry I am." I didn't reply. Her apology didn't change the past, and I had no desire to reopen wounds that were finally starting to heal. A new beginning. As I stood on the balcony of my apartment one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. Jake and Sarah's betrayal had shattered my world, but it didn't destroy me. I had rebuilt my life, brick by brick, creating something stronger and more beautiful than before. And while the scars would always be there, they no longer defined me. They were reminders of a storm I'd survived, proof that even in the darkest moments, there's a way forward. As for love, I wasn't rushing into anything. Whether or not Luke became a permanent part of my story, I knew one thing for certain: I was finally whole on my own. Months turned into a year, and life gradually became more stable. I had a new rhythm, a sense of purpose, and a clearer understanding of who I was. My painting hobby blossomed into something more significant when a local art gallery offered to display one of my pieces. The painting was called Shattered and Whole. It depicted a mosaic of broken glass arranged into a sunrise, a symbol of how beauty could emerge from pain. People at the gallery gravitated toward it, and some even asked about the story behind the piece. I didn't share all the details, of course, but it felt empowering to express myself through art. It reminded me that my experiences, painful as they were, had meaning. Jake reaches out. One afternoon, out of the blue, Jake reached out. Seeing his name on my phone screen sent a chill down my spine. I debated ignoring the call, but decided to answer. "Emily," he began, his voice hesitant. "I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to say something." I listened in silence as he apologized. Not the shallow apologies I'd heard before, but a deeply reflective one. He admitted how his actions had stemmed from his own insecurities and weaknesses, not anything I had done wrong. He spoke about how losing me had been the wake-up call he needed to confront his issues. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," he said, his voice breaking, "but I needed you to know that I'm truly sorry." For a moment, I felt the familiar sting of betrayal, but it was different this time. His words didn't have the power to hurt me anymore. I had healed too much for that. "I've moved on, Jake," I replied calmly, "but I hope you learn from this and become a better person." The power of closure. Jake's call felt like the final chapter in a book I was ready to close. It wasn't about excusing what he had done, but about letting go of the lingering bitterness that had weighed me down for so long. I realized that forgiveness wasn't for him. It was for me. It meant I no longer had to carry the burden of anger and resentment. Sarah's baby. As time passed, I occasionally heard updates about Sarah through mutual acquaintances. She had given birth to a baby girl, Emma, and was raising her as a single mother. A part of me wanted to hate Sarah forever, but I couldn't bring myself to. I thought about Emma, a child born from betrayal but innocent in all of it. One day, I ran into Sarah at a coffee shop. She looked different, older, quieter, and burdened by guilt. She was holding Emma, who was a bubbly toddler with bright eyes and a curious smile. We exchanged a brief, awkward greeting, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of hope in Sarah's eyes. "I hope you're doing well, Emily," she said softly. I nodded. "I am." And that was it. We didn't delve into the past, and we didn't need to. The encounter left me feeling strangely at peace. Finding love again. Luke and I grew closer over time, but it wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was slow, steady, and built on trust, something I hadn't felt in years. He taught me how to laugh again, how to let my guard down without fear of betrayal. One evening, as we walked along the beach, he turned to me and said, "Emily, you've been through so much, but you're still the most resilient, loving person I've ever met." I smiled, realizing that, for the first time in a long time, I believed it too. The life I built. Today, I stand stronger than ever. My art has become more than a passion. It's my career. My pieces are displayed in galleries across the city, each one telling a story of resilience, growth, and hope. Luke and I are planning a future together. But I know now that my happiness doesn't hinge on anyone else. It comes from within, from the strength I found after my world fell apart. As for Sarah and Jake, they're part of a past I've left behind. I wish them no harm, but I also don't dwell on them. Their betrayal shaped me, but it doesn't define me. My life is mine again, and for that, I'm endlessly grateful.